Welcome to this episode of the People Dividend Podcast. I'm your host, Mike Horne, and I am absolutely delighted that we're going to have an expert join us today as we move and go forward and dive deeply into the critical yet often overlooked human factors that drive business success. We're going to talk about trust, respect, engagement. I mean, all of these forces that make or break an organizational culture. And our guest today, John Guaspari, is an expert at turning these intangibles into tangible results. So welcome, John.
Thank you, Mike. I appreciate the opportunity to be here.
Let me tell my audience a little bit more about you. You're a recognized authority on organizational effectiveness and employee engagement. You bring multiple decades of experience consulting at Fortune 500 companies, helping leaders with translate these concepts that we think are so important, like trust and respect, these humanistic values, into empowerment and actionable strategies that drive results. Now, that's quite a bit. You're the author of 8 business books, including the classic "I Know It When I See It," a modern fable about quality. And tell us the title of your newest book.
The newest book is called "If Engagement is the What, Then Respect is the How."
Yeah, love that. If engagement is the what, then respect is the how. Fascinating. I love that. That title that you put together for this. So, you've spent, as I said, multiple decades helping organizations crack the code on engagement. If I start from a negative sort of engineering perspective, a problem to be fixed or a problem to be solved, what's the number one mistake you see leaders make when it comes to employee engagement? How can they fix it?
The number one mistake is I think they start out from speaking of an engineering perspective, you start out with a problem statement.
Right.
And if you start out with the wrong problem statement, you're probably not going to solve the problem that you want to solve. And the problem statement and what happens too often is the definition of engagement that leaders tend to use when they begin to undertake serious-minded efforts to improve employee engagement tends to be the wrong one. The reason organizations got very excited about the notion of employee engagement, and this tended to happen around the turn of the century, roughly. Research was done by a number of organizations, very reputable organizations. The Conference Board, Gallup did and continues to do important research about employee engagement, showing that a strong correlation between higher levels of employee engagement and important business results like profitability, productivity, employee retention rates, and so on. The definition that was behind that research was that engagement is the extent to which employees invest incremental effort and energy on the job.
Discretionary effort,
Discretionary effort.
incremental effort. Yes.
Yeah. What happens though too often is that engagement is a very common word, and there's people tend to use the mechanical definition of engagement as in things coming together, like gears engaging. So they say, well, if we just bring people together, we have achieved engagement. And while that can lead to engagement, that is not the same thing as engagement. The way I like to describe it, the example I like to use is to say that engagement is not what happens in the conference room. It's what happens in the heads and the hearts of the people who inhabit the conference room. And if you look at it as simply throwing people into a room and think you've got it done, you're not going to get it done. And that I see as a mistake that too many organizations make. They just think that, well, we'll put breakout sessions in our meeting and we've got engagement covered. And that is not the way to go.
Yeah, so true. And there is a little bit in our culture, for better or for worse, of survey says. in organizational life. And, my counsel, or maybe the wisest executive advice that I ever heard, which I repeated again and again and again, was just get out of your chair and talk with people. That's a first step.
Exactly. Exactly. I mean, in my work over the years, I did a lot of survey work.
Uh-huh.
And I think surveys are fine for what they are. If you know what they're doing and you know what your objective is, they're fine. But if you try and ascribe too much to the results of a survey, you're going to miss the boat. And to your point, people ask me, well, what can I do to achieve higher levels of engagement? I said, well, talk to people and get a sense, and to measure engagement, talk to people. You'll get a sense of the degree to which they're really jazzed about their job or not. But
Yeah.
people, uh, people tend not to want to deal with the soft stuff. They like to see stuff with three significant digits and on perk charts and then on PowerPoint slides. And they're uncomfortable doing that, but that's part of the job. I mean, the definition I always like to use of leadership was General Eisenhower's definition. He said that leadership is the art of getting someone else to do what you want him to do because he wants to do it.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's the want to do it part is the tricky part. And that to get that part right, it means you need to plumb your understanding of what makes that person tick. And that makes people uncomfortable. And the only way you're going to get at that is to talk to them. The title of my book is If Engagement is the What, then Respect is the How.
Right.
That is a manifestation of respect.
Right.
Just acknowledging someone's presence. Hi, how you doing?
Right.
That
Yeah.
that's respect.
And the
And
reality is that for most executives, time is so compressed that, I mean, they don't know what happened to you 5 minutes before you walked in the room, and they're not going to know what happens to you 5 minutes after.
right, right.
But it is a way to create, I would say, or to use your words, or words perhaps that we share, are around trust and respect. I usually, talk about dignity, kindness, and respect as foundational humanistic values that drive workplace engagement.
Yeah, yeah. I mean,
Hey, John, though, what do you think? I'm curious. We've had as a guest on the podcast Gallup's chief data scientist, Jim Harder.
yeah.
And I just saw some recent Gallup research that suggests that engagement's really bad right now. It's fallen to a low not seen since like 2014 or something. What do you think's going on?
Well, I think there may be a lot of things going on. I think it could be the fact that people are going about it wrong, the way
Yeah,
it
what you said,
going
right?
back to what I said earlier. It could be we're seeing the lagging indicator resulting from the work at home phenomenon.
Yeah,
It's harder to say hi to people and just have the casual interaction with people when you're just dealing with people on Zoom screens,
right,
and everything becomes an event instead of the more kind of humanistic, to use your word,
right.
interactions with people. And so I think that might have a lot to do with it. I could see where it just is more difficult, and I think people are just kind of confused about just the world in general. Things are a little topsy turvy these days.
Well, I think certainly what I often talk about is that there are a number of forces that drive a renewed focus on engagement. One is an advancing gig economy where people are putting together multiple jobs to have a livelihood and a career. And for many people, what's really become the dawn of the 4-day work week in the United States. People have work at home days, 2 work at home days a week, but we're moving towards a shorter time period at work. I think people also experience organization differently. I grew up in an era of Roosevelt Muscanner, men and women of the corporation, thought about organizations that way. And I think people experience organizations differently today. But all these things I think are contributing forces.
My daughter works for a company where everyone works remotely. It's the nature of their business. She lives in New Hampshire. Her boss lives in Israel. Her colleagues live in Silicon Valley. And they just had their first meeting of everyone on the southern coast of Spain. It's the first time she ever saw anybody, any of her colleagues, literally face to face, other than on Zoom. That has to have an effect.
I have, just to use this as an illustration and follow on from your example, I have a son who lives in Boston who wouldn't trade his remote, fully remote job for anything in a company that's doing really well and that's rewarded him quite handsomely for doing what he does. And I have a daughter who works for a Fortune 10 company, and she's in the office.
And does she like being in the office?
She has enough flexibility because she also has a young family, to be in the office, I think 3 days a week and flex on 2 other days. But, I think 4 day a week is an expectation in this big, behemoth in which she works, all tied to promotion, visibility, things that happen and yet seem to happen in these fully remote organizations as well.
Yeah, but the dynamic has to be different.
It has to be different.
Has to be different. I don't claim to any particular expertise about it.
Well, let's just dig into your background a little bit. I mean, you started your career as an aerospace engineer before you transitioned to leadership consulting. So, how did your technical background shape your approach to what we might call these humanistic values, these skills that we've been discussing?
I think it helped only insofar as I when you study engineering, what you're studying is the discipline for problem solving. And so I worked for a company a long time ago for whom the issue of total quality management was a big deal. This was in the 1980s.
Right.
And so I was in a position, I won't bore you with the details, but where I was given the charge to learn a little bit more about the dynamics of this TQM thing.
Hmm.
And I visited a bunch of customers, competitors, went to seminars, read whatever I get my hands on. And one of the basic tenets of TQM was quality is everybody's job, not just the job of the quality department.
Right.
And I looked around and saw the resources that were available to quote everybody. And they tended to be these 700-page tomes of statistical process control, which were very important to a few people in the company. And because of my engineering background, I could understand the material and I could understand it well enough to understand that everybody doesn't need to know all this. And so I kind of boil things down to, I think everybody needs to know these half dozen things. And that led me to write my first book, which was an attempt to write a very short book, the audience for whom was everybody, which was, I don't need, and the way I described it to people was I care a great deal about my health. I need to know my blood pressure, my cholesterol level, my weight, and my doctor's phone number. I don't need medical texts. I don't need a medical degree. Similarly, quality is important to everyone. You don't need to know all the statistical analyses that go with statistical process control. Here are the 6 things you need to know. And I wrote this very short book. And so I took an engineer's approach to the problem, and it was the right book at the right place at the right time. And it sold like crazy, which was a good thing because I got laid off about 2 months after the book was published. And I had I had begun to get phone calls from people saying, do you do speeches? Do you do seminars? Do you do consulting on this? And I said, why, of course I do. And
Yeah.
so that was the connection. And what I learned, by the way, and that this was 40 years ago, it wasn't called employee engagement then, but in retrospect, I realized what I put my finger on was the need for employee engagement, a way to connect with people about this very important topic that wasn't happening. How am I going to touch people about this important topic so that they will invest incremental effort and energy? And so even though it wasn't called engagement until around the year 2000, my entire career was about engagement. And it only became explicitly that, around the turn of the century.
Yeah, that's amazing. And do you think that word is in favor today? I mean, words come and go. I mean, what do you think about that?
The word engagement?
Right.
I think it wouldn't be a bad idea if we could come up with a substitute, because people do hear these things and kind of roll their eyes. Oh, that old thing. But that's dangerous too, because you come up with another word and people will roll their eyes saying, oh, this is the next big thing that HR or some consultants have come up with. People ask me, what's the single most important thing you can do to achieve higher levels of engagement? And my answer is manifest respect all day, every day. And you will be about 80% of the way there.
That's great. Let's sort of start to begin to end on that note about manifesting
Okay.
respect. Can you identify some specific behaviors that might accompany that? I mean, so let's imagine you've got you're a busy person, new aspiring CEO is a busy person, and you want to help him understand or break down that concept. What would the conversation look like, John?
Well, one point in my career, I had responsibility for leadership development for a very large corporation. And
Right,
I remember a vice president who was former military. Okay, he said, I'm very frustrated. I know what I want people to do. I'm very clear. I tell them what I want done. And sometimes they don't do it. And even if they don't do it, they don't do it as fast as I want them to do it. And I said to him, I thought hard about whether or not I should say this, but I decided to. So, well,
right.
Bill, you got to realize that if they don't do what you want them to do or don't do it as fast as you want them to do, you can't have them thrown in federal prison anymore. This is different. You have to somehow, you can't just, leadership is not just asserting positional authority. You have to talk to them and put aside get down. It sounds condescending to say get down to their level. I mean, hierarchically, get down to
Yeah,
their
right,
level.
right, right.
Hierarchically, just talk to them person to person. That's one. And we talked about it earlier. It's saying hello to people. It's
Yeah,
acknowledging their presence.
right.
In my book, there's an example of someone sending an email to an employee had sent an email to the boss thinking he was responding to a boss's request, and the boss's email in response said, not what I was looking for, all bold, all italicized, 4 exclamation points. And I do a little analysis on that's not the way to do that. There are ways, that's disrespectful to that employee. That employee is now going to go into a swivet, maybe have to rearrange his day, which is going to cause other people's problems, which is disrespectful to them. My definition of respect, by the way, which I talk about in the book, is giving due consideration to the other. And the word due is in there so that I'm not saying you should throw rose petals in people's paths. So you have business to run. But have you stopped to think through what you said or didn't say, what you did or didn't do, and how it's going to affect others? And that sounds like very homely, trite advice, but it's a simple notion that's very difficult to follow every day because, as you said, they're very, people are busy and it's easy to overlook.
I'm always thinking about an expression that complex is easy, simple is difficult. So,
It's one of the things I always try to make to people. There's a difference between simple and easy.
right,
You know,
same.
complex, same thing, same thing. So
Yeah,
it's
same.
perfectly possible for something to be simultaneously,
Simple and elegant, simple and
it's
effective.
simple enough. There's another engineering term.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, right. Well, John, it's been an absolute pleasure to have you as a guest on the People Dividend podcast. where can where can our listeners, my listeners, learn more about your work and get a copy of your latest book, Engagement, What, Respect, How?
The title of the book is If Engagement is the What, Then Respect is the How. They can go to
Right.
my website, which is it's my name, all one word. My name is on the screen there, but there's no space between the N and the G. John
It'll be in the
Guaspari.
show notes for everyone.
Okay, johnguaspari.com. You can order it from there. And on that website, there's a bunch of links to a bunch of articles I've written over the years, and mostly business articles, but I'm sort of semi-retired now, so I write for general interest publications now. I write a lot, some book and movie reviews. I write a lot about sports. Years ago, I had a humor column, so I put a bunch of those on there. Those might be fun to read, but that's how you can find it.
Oh, that's great. Yeah. Thank you for making all those resources available. Thank you for being an inspiration. Thank you for all your contributions and the work that you're continuing to do to help organizations and leaders fuel their success. So, for everyone who's tuned into today's podcast with John Guaspari, if you enjoyed the episode, don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, and tune into the next episode. So, once again, John, thank you.
Thank you, Mike.
And until the next episode of the People Dividend Podcast, stay well.